Welcome into the 615 Sessions podcast. It's lovely to have you guys in for another episode. Hope everybody's having a great Thursday afternoon. It's a beautiful day here in Middle Tennessee, so we figure we take the podcast outside, and it's lovely to have you guys in for another episode. So while we take this quick halftime between the radio show and prime time to talk about a variety of different things, there's always something going on with the Tennessee Titans, and there's not a ton of time to get to everything, no matter how many different platforms that we have. But there was a big article on ESPN. I keep coming up with different websites that aren't the right website, that I thought was interesting in how it ranked the Titans offseason and the logic that it gave for the Titans having a particularly poor offseason by measurements, according to this one NFL analyst. So we'll get to all of those things here in just a second. We're happy to have you guys. J. Rome Hurd says, "Sup, Buck? Who talking shit about us?" Well, I'm here to tell you just that. But first, I have to tell you that the 615 Sessions podcast is made possible by Two Rivers Ford, by Superbook Sports, and Relax the Back Nashville. All great partners that make this podcast possible. So who's talking shit? You guys want to know? Bill Barnwell, who is one of ESPN's, I think, one of the better talents and better NFL minds that they have on ESPN.com right now. They don't use him a ton on TV. I know Scott Van Pelt puts him on the Late Night Sports Center on occasion, but mostly his job is to be a writer, and I know he makes a frequent appearance on a lot of their podcasts as well. But Bill Barnwell broke down, in his estimation, with insights and analysis, ranking all 32 NFL teams across this offseason and how, according to his estimation, they've done, providing a fair amount of facts. So what Bill Barnwell did is he ranked the Tennessee Titans last, dead last, as a part of the NFL offseason rankings. He took this and said the Tennessee Titans were 32 out of 32. The Tennessee Titans had the worst of the off seasons, and here's exactly why. So I'll read to you that explanation here in just a second. Russwood Park says more foul language from this platform. That's right. If you don't like it, you could probably eat it, Russ, because it's the internet, and I think I am judicious with how I choose my cuss words and also which cuss words that I choose to use. But if you can't handle that as a grown-ass adult, then this is probably not the place for you. So you can take your ass on home. That was excessive by me. Too many asses in one sentence, but maybe I can squeeze a third ass, maybe even a fourth ass into the same sentence in trying to do my analysis of the Titans' 32nd ranking of this offseason. Bill Barnwell telling you that the Titans offseason was in fact ass, about 5. But as we look at the offseason that they've had, some of you may agree with what the Titans have done or what the Titans have not done as part of what makes them the worst offseason or part of what accounts for the worst offseason in football. And I'm going to read you the explanation in Bill Barnwell's own words. I'm going to tell you what he liked most about what they did this offseason here in just a second, but I will remind you that Relax the Back Nashville is who makes this podcast possible. Go to relaxtheback.com and you can make sure to get the best back support out there. It'll help your workflow. It'll help your day-to-day, how you feel. It'll help your sleeping habits at Relax the Back. They will always go above and beyond to put you in the best position to succeed, whether that's a new office chair, whether that's a mattress that you need to be considering given your sleep issues, if you're somebody who experiences those. If you're somebody like me and you're just sitting too much during your day and you need a standing desk, Relax the Back has that too. Go to relaxtheback.com for more information. Check out their great store in Green Hills. Hashtag We Got Your Back Nashville is what Relax the Back Nashville offers to you. So looking at all the different things that the Tennessee Titans have done this offseason, here's what Bill Barnwell likes about their offseason. Now, for what it's worth, he's only made it in his rankings. I think this was the first of a series. He went 32-17, and he'll probably go 16-1 on the next rankings. But 17 in this particular measurement was the Jacksonville Jaguars, and 32 was the Titans. So here's what he writes about what he likes. New general manager Rand Carthon cleared out vets who weren't living up to expectations. While the Titans are only a year removed from finishing as the number 1 seed in the AFC, their second half collapse last year spurred the firing of GM John Robinson and an aggressive retooling. So he goes through all the different moves that Carthon made, right? Cutting Lewan, Dupree, Robert Woods, Zach Cunningham, all moves that he says make sense financially, but adds, quote, but might have been avoided by a team hoping to compete in 2023. Talking about Lewan, Dupree, Robert Woods, and Zach Cunningham. So before I read you what else he liked about their offseason, I'm going to stop with that bit of analysis there, because this is where I disagree. And I like Bill Barnwell. I think he does tremendous work. I respect him as much as I do anybody in this profession. But I do think that it's interesting to make the case for Lewan, Dupree, Robert Woods, and Zach Cunningham as moves that only make financial sense. When having watched Robert Woods, having seen how unavailable Dupree and Lewan and frankly last year Cunningham were, those players aren't necessarily going to help them compete outright in 2023. You could make the case for Lewan more than any of them, but I also think that doesn't take into account the fact that Taylor Lewan is in all likelihood not playing football next year. Now I know Taylor hasn't officially retired. And I know that for Lewan, he is currently embroiled in a lawsuit, is suing, as a matter of fact, Dr. James Andrews, the famous ACL repair orthopedic surgeon, that for botching, in Taylor's estimation, allegations for screwing up the ACL repair. So even Taylor, I don't think you could count as a move that would have helped this Titans team been more competitive and making only sense in terms of releasing them financially. Like I said, I don't think Taylor could help them more than Andre Dillard could in 2023. But what I'm saying is implying that by that sentence ignores all the things that were around Dupree, Woods, Cunningham, and Lewan at the time, which made them cuts that made sense both financially and in terms of competitiveness. So that I would agree with. Ben Hall says if his knee is worth a lawsuit, then I can't see him playing. Talking about Lewan. Well, this is, and obviously I've talked to Taylor at various points, and that's never been any kind of a secret, but I do think that Taylor's not, outright done with the idea of him playing in the NFL, but I do think that he is, going about his life as if he is unencumbered by what it might be to play professional football at this level. I do think, though, that it's still notable that he was released with a failed physical designation on his knee repair, which means that if the season started today, Taylor Lewan would still not be ready, right? And that's something that people have to keep in mind when considering whether they want to offer Taylor Lewan a contract or not, the medical side of things. So let me read you the rest of the positive analysis before I tell you why Bill Barnwell ranked you as having the worst offseason among all NFL teams. He says of Rand Carthon, mostly stuck to importing former 49ers players, Daniel Brunskill, Azeez Al-Shaair, and Arden Key, of course, who was in San Fran before he was with the Jags last season. He adds, Key is an underrated edge rusher, and none of those contracts are unreasonable. Hoping to rebuild the offensive line, the Titans used their first-round pick on Peter Skoronski, who should start at guard before possibly moving to left tackle. Carthon also moved up in the second round to grab Will Levis, who could start at quarterback for Tennessee in 2024. So those are all the things that he liked. Speaking of Arden Key, we had Arden Key on the radio show today, and I thought it was really, really good. I think that Arden Key is going to benefit from his first full-time opportunity, his first opportunity to be a full-time starter. Now that he's 4 years into his NFL career, San Francisco, Jacksonville, and I believe, if I remember correctly, did Arden Key have a Raiders stint, or am I thinking of a different LSU pass rusher? I want to say that Arden Key was drafted by the Niners back in 2018, but I can double check quickly. He was drafted by the Raiders. Okay, how about that? So drafted by Oakland, was with them when they went to Vegas, was played in 14 games as a Las Vegas Raider, and then ended up a year in San Francisco, a year in Jacksonville after the fact. So I think that Arden Key, go listen to that interview, not just because I did it, but I think that you'll like getting to know him and like seeing how he's approaching this particular opportunity with the Tennessee Titans, and that he makes a lot of sense for this football team. So all those moves made sense, right? We understood the value. We understood why they were doing what they were doing. We understood why they made the releases that they made, because they're cash strapped, right? and they had to have money to continue to add talent to this team while jettisoning, hard word to say, some of the players that made them relevant in the last couple of years that have since underperformed on their current contracts. So I'm going to read you what Bill Barnwell, or why Bill Barnwell thinks you had the worst offseason of any NFL team here in just a second, right after I remind you that this podcast is made possible by Two Rivers Ford. Go to Two Rivers Ford for 2023 quality American-made Ford vehicles, an award-winning customer service staff, and the kind of honesty and integrity that you know you can trust from a company that's been doing business in Middle Tennessee for 40 years. Nobody is better. Nobody works harder to make sure that you have everything that you want as a car buying customer. I'm a Two Rivers Ford customer myself. I could not be happier. In fact, we're sitting outside right now. You guys are sitting with me on my back patio. I can directly pan to my 2022 Ford Explorer. Look at Sugar. She's beautiful. She came to me directly from Two Rivers Ford in Mount Juliet, or online at tworiversford.com. So as you look at all the different offseason moves, we know what the primary complaint for people locally here is, right? The idea that they did not do enough at the wide receiver position. Some people didn't like that they traded up for Levis. Some people didn't like the Spears pick, given that there were wide receivers still on the board, and all these different things come to pass. What happens on the field will determine, says MB, whether they had a good or a bad offseason, and of course he's correct. Games aren't based on opinions, and that is, games aren't won based on opinions. That is also correct. But it is, I do think it's, I don't think there's any harm in seeing how everybody else feels about your team versus, I think it's a good exercise for me personally, when I read through these things, because I think it can kind of check some of the things that I am so, I'm so entrenched, me personally, or we, not to speak for all my colleagues in Titans media, but I think we get so entrenched in how we think about things and what we see on an everyday basis. And, sometimes it's okay to remove yourself from the scenario, take a look at how other people are viewing this and see how it runs up against with what you know to be so, what you know to be maybe not as grounded in reality as somebody else might present it to you. But I think, I don't think there's any harm in checking in on those evaluations from time to time. Whether you agree or disagree with them is entirely your opinion, because you're correct. None of these things matter until they actually play football games. Lewis says, you named your truck Sugar. Yeah, I named. Well, so my cars have always been named Sugar. That is Sugar 2, as a matter of fact. My first car was Sugar, and that is Sugar the second. So Gary 2 says, I only respect opinions from y'all, the local media, just outside, or the outside just says anything. They don't really know the Titans. And I think there's some people who do, some people who don't. I don't think it has to be blanket assessments, right? Because we always run into this national media disrespects the Titans, blah, blah, blah. They don't pay attention to the Titans. They don't watch the Titans and whatever. Because I know plenty of people do, right? Like, for example, dear friend of mine, Diana Rossini, who works for ESPN. Diana covers a lot of NFL teams, but Diana, as a part of her responsibilities, if the Titans are playing a big game, who do they send? They send Diana. Diana knows the players. She knows the coaches. She knows Rain Carthon from San Francisco. She covers the league well enough that she knows a lot of the pieces and parts that are in place. Now, I think where you do get some of the mixed messages from local versus national is when the games actually start being played. Because, for example, to run it through my prism, my job every day is to watch Tennessee Titans football, to watch practice, to talk to players, to speak with coaches, to watch the games, to rewatch the games to see if there's anything I've missed, to travel to the games, right? My entire professional existence revolves around that particular local football team that works just down the street from my home here in lovely scenic downtown Nashville. Diana, for example, is being dropped in from ESPN, covering all, whatever teams have been delegated to her as a part of her, her region, right? Or her area, for lack of a better term. Now, whether that's done geographically or whatever, that's not necessarily a point here, but you understand that Diana is covering one team one week and then coming in and covering another team the next. So, I think those are some of the places where the disconnect can form. And I think that's more in the season as opposed to during the off season. Because we're only out there one day a week. You know what I'm saying? And obviously I talk to people on a local basis every day in some form or fashion with that organization, with players, with former players, with former coaches. Obviously, I'm doing more on a day-to-day basis than just the one day that we're allowed to go to practice every week during this time of year. Obviously, once the regular season starts, we're at practice every day. But offseason, it's not that hard to keep up with 32 teams because there's only so much availability that's out there and no games are actually being played. So that's why I think these things are most fair at this time of year. And so that is kind of the approach that I take to stuff like this. So let's take a look at why Bill Barnwell thinks you had the worst offseason of any NFL team. I'm going to read it now from ESPN.com. I'm not sure whether the Titans are rebuilding, he writes. The two moves hanging over the organization's head all offseason still haven't been resolved. Ryan Tannehill, Derrick Henry, still on the roster. Both are entering the final year of their respective deals and have declined over the past 2 seasons. He means in terms of performance. Tannehill is 34, Henry is 29. Are they really going to be pushing this team forward in 2023, let alone in 2024 and beyond? Kevin Byard was asked to take a pay cut, but after he called Tennessee's bluff, the team kept its starting safety on the roster. All those things are so. Holding on to these 3 players compromised the moves Carthon could have made as he rebuilt the roster. This is what Bill Barnwell says. Titans needed a new left tackle after cutting Lewan, but the addition of Andre Dillard, saw Carthon pay $10 million for a 2019 first-round pick who didn't develop into a starter under standout offensive line coach Jeff Stoutland in Philadelphia. Is Dillard really likely to be better in Tennessee? A secondary that has missed on draft picks and free agent signings, added only Sean Murphy-Bunting on a 1-year deal. So he's saying that basically all the money that they freed up was not as consequential as freeing up the money that they could have if they released Derrick Henry, if they released or traded Ryan Tannehill, if they found a way to move on from Kevin Byard's money. And what I would say to you is if you're chastising them, or if you're going to hold it as a knock against them, that they cut the 4 players that he mentioned that they did, Lewan, Dupree, Woods, and Cunningham, and say that a team who was going to be looking to be more competitive might not have made those moves for just purely financial purposes, but then also cite the 3 players who are going to keep them most competitive out of the potential salary cap casualties that they could have had in Henry, Tannehill, and Byard, that keeping those compromised what else he could have done on the roster, then I think that logic is flawed. I understand what he's saying, understand why he feels the way that he does, but I also think that it's ignoring the coaching staff who currently works here in Mike Vrabel and under Mike Vrabel, and how they're approaching this. The most competitive players, the players that are going to keep them the most competitive, they ended up keeping. And that is being held as a knock against them, judging by this analysis. So, like I said, I think these things can always be subjective, and it's based on your opinion. The secondary is very much in question. He is correct about that. Anthony says he's not wrong. Well, like I said, you can agree with him, you can disagree with him. I just think that it's kind of talking in a circle. I think that it's kind of talking in a circle, right? The way that the analysis has been done. Now, you can also be confused by what the hell the Titans are doing, right? Are you going to go ahead and have this hard reset and make the moves that are going to make you most competitive in the long term, as opposed to trying to make sure you maintain some degree of credit or competitive nature right now? I think that's fair. But I do think that while you look at the Titans right now, you can question their methods, but you can't fault a coaching staff for wanting to maintain competitiveness rather than let the bottom fall out for one single season, the way that it seems that a lot of people in media, and I've gone back and forth on the logic of tanking before in my life, but I just think that's a product of not spending time around this specific coaching staff and understanding how they're going to go about their business. Again, you can question the way that they're going to go about their business, because I think there are plenty of flaws with the path that they have chosen to take. But ultimately, if you ask me, or if I asked you, do you trust that the combination of Mike Vrabel and Rand Carthon are doing things that are in the best interest of the Tennessee Titans, both in the immediate and the long term? Well, of course, I'm not going to question that they're doing that. I do genuinely believe that they're doing the things that are in the best interest of the football team right now, but also things that they think can help them into the present. And I think the place where most people are questioning them is it really worth being competitive this year to get a better version of your football team next year? because at least that's what this comment alleges, that bottom should fall out to force us to make the changes rather than just tread water. And I think the argument, if you were talking to the coaching staff, that I know they would make is that, yeah, last year the bottom did fall out. We lost 7 straight games. That was enough. We don't want to do that shit again. What do you mean? That's what they would present the argument to you. Because, of course, they don't, if they lose, that doesn't make their jobs any safer. You're asking them to do something that's completely counterintuitive to their competitive nature and their job security. And I think both of those things are fair at this point. So whether you think this is a good evaluation of the Titans offseason, whether you think it's an unfair one, that's fine. That's what opinions are for. And Bill Barnwell is just offering his courtesy of ESPN.com. It's going to do it for us on the 615 sessions. Speaking of podcasts, like I mentioned, I interviewed Arden Key on the radio show today. He was great. Go check that out wherever you get your podcasts. The radio show is, of course, called The Buck Rising Show, not to be self-involved. You can also check out the first part that we released of the live show from Saturday night with Greg Cosell. It was phenomenal. This week's episode that you guys are going to hear from that 2.5-hour live taping that we did, about 32 minutes of it, 32 minutes on Greg's background and Will Levis and his fit within the Titans offense. Go check out the install wherever it is that you get your podcast. Have a great rest of your afternoon, and I'll talk to you in a couple of hours on A to Z Sports.